What a strange week it's been on Dartmoor, weather-wise at least. We started shivering in cold, foggy mornings, so thick we couldn't see past our granite wall. Then, almost overnight, we were blessed with the most splendid sunrises and glorious days of sunshine. For those sweltering in London and across Europe, let us assure you, Dartmoor has its own climate. It does what it wants, when it wants, and rarely bothers to coordinate with the rest of the country. We've had stunning sunny days, but always with that cool Dartmoor breeze. So while Londoners roast in their gardens, we've been out on the lawn playing skittles, sipping Pimm's, and enjoying a perfect English summer's day. Now, down to business. This week we finished chimney number 1. Hooray, I hear you say. We also build a botanical press to create the most exquisite herbarium, press hundreds of flowers from the garden, and get stuck into some serious demolition of the landing shower room. Oh, and did we mention the family who lived here in the 1950s dropped by and gifted us the original plans of the house? So grab a cup of tea, pull up a chair, and let us show you how it all unfolded. This week we embarked on a journey both delicate and timeless. We are creating our very own herbarium. Before we could begin our herbarium in earnest, Watson set about making our very own botanical press, the indispensable tool for our long-term herbarium project. We picked up some timber from the local yard, located a few large bolts from our trusty supply of bolts and screws, and set about crafting a press so we could start preserving this summer's flora and fauna without delay. Knowing that we wanted to press quite large flowers, leaves and ferns, we decided that an A3 botanical press would be more suitable for our needs. Watson set about lining up the cuts that were needed using his favourite and most trusted tools. We decided we would go a little more heavy-duty than most presses on the market, as we wanted to be able to add as much weight during the pressing process as possible. With that in mind, we settled on a design featuring a bottom, middle and top board, allowing different sections to be accessed easily throughout the pressing process. Watson lined up a piece of A3 paper on the cut boards, allowing him to mark and make the final cut with precision. With a bit of cutting, measuring and sanding, Watson, as ever, made short work of the project. In fact, it was all done before breakfast, and before one had even emerged from their pyjamas. Ever the perfectionist, Watson added additional pieces of timber for extra squeeze factor, ensuring maximum pressure could be applied where needed. Next came the task of creating the recesses for the bolt heads to sit within. Using a spade bit, each recessed hole was carefully made, checked, and then gently cleaned. These recesses will allow our botanical press to sit flat on any surface, with the bolt heads nestled snugly within the timber. Watson then drilled through to create the holes for the bolts, after adding a few extra clamps to ensure nothing shifted during the process, a very satisfying step in itself. As you can probably tell, we do love a project, and we especially enjoy creating things like this ourselves for our house. It's immensely satisfying knowing that we've made this by hand, adding to the future storytelling that this botanical press will carry. With a final brush off and sand down, and a careful chisel here and there to ensure each hole was perfectly clear of timber, the washers, bolts, and wing nuts were added to complete the press. There are a few finishing touches we plan to add over the coming weeks to transform it into a truly beautiful and perfect piece of herbarium loveliness. But first, it must be put to work. Inspired by the Victorian passion for scientific collections of preserved plant specimens, by the Japanese art of Oshibana, and traced all the way back to ancient civilizations, including the Egyptians, who pressed flowers for burial rituals and adorned tombs with their preserved beauty. As we know, pressed flowers were a beloved pastime of the Victorians, not merely for their aesthetic appeal, but also for fashion, and also used as a subtle form of coded communication, a particularly delightful thought, given our home's proximity to the storied haunts of Sherlock Holmes. A herbarium, for those unacquainted, is a collection of preserved plant specimens, some centuries old, meticulously recorded and studied by botanists to understand, record and preserve the natural world. Ours begins its life here, in 2025, as we document the extraordinary flora and fauna flourishing around our house. Though our collection is just taking root, we dream it will remain here for centuries to come, a living, breathing botanical story for all who visit. This week I gathered a selection of the vibrant magenta lesser knapweed, wonderfully three-dimensional blooms that may or may not press well. I've tried cutting some in half, left others whole, and experimented with a few variations to see how they turn out. Fortunately, we have plenty more in the garden, so there's time for a bit of trial and error. A few weeks ago, the garden's golden hues of buttercups, lilies, tormentil, dandelions, Welsh poppies, and large yellow leucostrife, just to name a few, were also gathered and pressed under a stack of our coffee table books. We've now added all of these treasures into our new botanical press, allowing them to be preserved until we're ready to frame some for our rooms and place the others into our herbarium collection. We'll come back, in a few days' time, to change the paper on the new flowers being pressed, so we can prevent them from moulding. At that point, we'll also be adding another batch of this summer's florals to make sure we're capturing everything this season brings. Watson begins by adding concrete to the top of the chimney to create the chimney's flaunching. With this, Watson adds some concrete reinforcing mesh. This process was somewhat reminiscent of making mud pies as a child, and Watson seemed to revel in it, finding a huge amount of enjoyment, especially as he made the final few passes with his trowel, creating that beautiful, wet and shiny mud pie finish. Now, these things aren't meant to look perfect at this stage. Perfection comes a little later, with the final render, but what a marvellous mud pie we have, perched atop the first of our 5 chimneys, don't you agree? A little while later, in fact some days later, the concrete is finally dry enough to continue to the next stage. Watson adds scratches to the surface so that the render can adhere nicely. These scratches seem to follow a garden theme, resembling what one might describe as worm squiggles. Next, a sealant was applied before the final render was added. Watson then returned to ground level to collect a few tools in his handy yellow bucket, so he could remove the edging he had carefully put in place to create a nice sharp edge at the top of the chimney. a bit of grinding and sanding followed, and then the lead clips were added back. These keep the lead skirt neatly tucked in place around the chimney. Watson then set about adding the first coat of paint. We applied the recommended 3 coats, which after allowing time between layers, looked amazing. We decided on a soft ivory tone, rather than the somewhat yellowing magnolia currently covering the rest of the render around the house. The new colour looks so much fresher, brighter, and more inviting overall. It will also sit beautifully with our white window frames, and help the house feel softer and more welcoming in general. One down, 4 chimneys to go. Stay tuned. The exciting news is that we've met the lovely family who lived here in the 1950s, and they kindly popped by with the original architectural drawings of the house. We couldn't have been more thrilled. They're absolutely incredible. We're rather partial to anything historical, especially when it relates to our own home. We can't wait to uncover the full history of this house, which we're currently researching and will share with you as soon as we can. These are just a few pages of the plans we've been gifted. They're beautifully hand-drawn on linen. We're in the process of carefully flattening them so they can be scanned and preserved, and we'll show them in more detail soon. For now, we're using them as a wonderful guide to show you which rooms we're starting to redesign and renovate. Today, we're focusing on our shower room on the first landing. Historically, this space was used by the servants, who we believe accessed warm water here before carrying it to the bedrooms for washing. The room was later converted into a landing water closet, or a cloakroom if you will, and then finally renovated again, we believe by the Duchy of Cornwall, into a bathroom with a shower, toilet and sink, which is how we plan to keep it. Another delightful aspect of these original hand-drawn linen plans is the back. Because the drawings were done in colour on linen, the pigments have gently seeped through, creating a beautiful, almost ethereal pattern on the reverse side. On the front, as you run your finger across the paper, you can still feel the subtle indentations left by the pen as it traced the border details, a tangible reminder of the draftsman's meticulous hand. And the pièce de résistance is, of course, the handwriting. The architect's signature and date, penned with elegant flourish, are works of art in their own right. We feel incredibly privileged to have been gifted such a treasure, and we're amazed at how wonderfully preserved these plans are, especially considering they were drafted in 1894. Let's take a quick look at what this shower room looked like before we started pulling it apart. Where the shower is currently positioned used to be the toilet back in the 1950s, as the room didn't even have a shower back then. The walls are mouldy, and the radiators have rusted beautifully, a sad result of the house being closed up for so long. And the floor? Oh, we had high hopes for uncovering a glorious old Victorian terrazzo. But alas, we were greeted instead by yet another breathtakingly hideous vinyl masterpiece, heroically trying and failing to mimic individual tiles. Rest assured, this spectacular slab of faux flooring is most definitely on its way out the door, destined for a swift and well-deserved exit stage left. We began by removing the old toilet, sink and shower, all of which had certainly seen better days. The sink and toilet came away fairly easily, while the shower put up a bit of a fight, but after a determined struggle we finally managed to break it free. Next, we pulled up the vinyl and set to work removing all of the tiles from the walls. We then tackled the shower tiles and demolished the side wall of the shower, allowing us to open up the space to its original full width, so everything could be properly inspected. Next, we inspected the pipework, which revealed plenty of issues. As we've seen elsewhere in the house, the workmanship was inconsistent at best, so we'll be redoing everything to ensure it's in perfect working order. What surprised us most was the complete lack of proper waterproofing, just a small strip of cement board around the shower tray, with no thought that water might reach higher up the walls where it actually flows from. It's astonishing, especially considering how easily water can damage wooden studs. Having lived overseas and rebuilt a house to strict standards, we're amazed at the lack of care here to prevent structural damage and mould. In this shower, water had been leaking behind the wall for ages, leaving the studs soaked and structurally unsound. Since the UK doesn't enforce strict bathroom waterproofing standards, which we find a little mad, we'll be applying what we've learned abroad, adding a full waterproofing system to avoid future issues, especially with wooden joists below. I returned later that day to find that Watson had cleaned up the room and had it prepped and ready for me to come in and take new measurements so we could start planning the remodel. All that remained was a single yellow marigold glove fluttering in the breeze perched over the fan outlet that now opens to the outside world. It seemed the glove had taken it upon itself to welcome visitors with a jaunty royal wave. Watson then returned, trusty chisel in hand, and set about removing all the plaster from the back wall. As you can see, some of it was barely holding on. Large chunks came off in our hands with little or no effort at all. Along the way, we discovered a few original wooden wedges, which will keep safe and sound. Things like this just aren't made the way they used to be, and they're part of the house's story, so it's fun to hang on to them. Next, we'll come back to repoint the brick wall and decide what to do with the plasterwork on the back of the main chimney, which you can see on the left side of the video. This area is damp, so the plaster has to come off. However, it's very well adhered to the chimney stack behind for once, so we'll need to break out a few power tools to get it all off. After that, we'll redo the pipework and the floor joists, move on to insulation, and then finally arm the fun part. I can start sourcing pieces for the room and decorating it to look amazing. And that's where we'll leave things for today. Chisels down, dust settled, and mysteries uncovered. Until then, keep your marigold gloves at the ready and your sense of humour intact. They'll both come in handy. We're buzzing with excitement over the beautiful hand-drawn plans and can't wait to uncover more of the house's history. Oh, and of course, to see how our herbarium is coming along. We look forward to welcoming you back soon.